Okay guys, I messed up big time. In my last video I asked you guys to leave some countries in the comments to draw a Miku version of, and someone said to draw Colombia. So I was super hyped about this and immediately got to drawing. However, Krita decided to cause problems and I wasn't able to export my speed paint. After trying to fix the issue and almost going insane from not being able to figure out what was wrong, I had to delete the speed paint in order to fix the problem. I'm still going to show you the final drawing and explain to you what went through my mind while drawing, before we get to the main drawing, which is Mexican Miku. For Colombian Miku, I first looked up all the national symbols, and found the Christmas orchid, which I drew as the hair accessory. The outfit was just inspired by clothing I found online of Colombian women. The national tree is the wax palm tree, as I found out, which worked out well because all the pictures of nature I looked at as inspiration had those in them. I wanted to put the sombrero volteado in there, but some Colombians online said that was a little too on the nose, so I scrapped that. Instead, I found out that Colombia also is known for making the most valuable gems in the world, so I tried to put a Gachala emerald on her belly piercing, but that didn't work out too well. You can't really tell that it's supposed to be a gem because it looks like a green piercing, but whatever. As I was working on the background, I felt like there was some life missing there, so I looked up what animals live in Colombia and I found a bunch of birds. Mainly the ara, which has been one of my favorite birds. Turns out there's also a supermarket called Ara in Colombia, which has the cutest mascot. Another bird I found was the yellow-eared parrot, which I drew flying in the air. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this drawing. I hope you liked this drawing, and I would like to know if I got Colombian Miku right in your opinion. And while you are in the comments, I would also love to hear what other country I should draw a Miku version of. Maybe this time I can draw a country that isn't in Latin America, because Mexican Miku was the third one in a row. Please leave some suggestions in the comments and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can get into the speed paint of Mexican Miku. First I sketched out the pose, and I already knew that I wanted to have her sitting at a table, just to show off some Mexican food. Because I didn't have to draw the bottom part of her body, I finished this pretty quickly and was able to draw Miku's features. After that I started to draw her hair, which I wanted to have in braids since that's a hairstyle lots of Mexican ladies have enjoyed over the years. In many of the images I found online, the women had ribbons in their hair, so I added those later and colored them in the colors of the Mexican flag. I liked the traditional clothing from Tabasco a lot, so I immediately knew that this is what I was going to go with. Like I said, I wanted to have a bunch of Mexican food in the front, and so I had to do some research on that. In a video about Mexico's Independence Day, many people said that they like to eat pozole with their family on a special day. Pambazos also were mentioned often, so those dishes definitely had to be in the drawing. Lastly, I included tamales, and drawing food is harder than expected. Besides the fact that this was a first for me, I also struggled with all those details, but that's something we can get into later. For the dress, I looked up a bunch of references and I noticed that most of them have this floral pattern. I think it's hibiscus, but I'm not sure. In most of the pictures I found the women also wore a certain kind of necklace with beads on it, but I didn't want it all to be a reference to Tabasco culture. After all, there are many parts to Mexico. With most of the figure done, I focused on the background and I used the assistance tool for the vanishing lines, which I had never done before. The program didn't record that, so I thought I'd mention it. It was hard to figure out at first, but it's definitely worth trying out. I feel like it helped me here. Now I had the layout of the drawing figured out, so I did line art. Not much to say here, except that I did miss the necklace part a bit. So I thought about what I could do here. At first I wanted to do some reference to ancient Mexico, but that proved harder than expected. There are so many tribes and cultures that I totally became overwhelmed and gave up on that idea. Instead, I found out that monarch butterflies are really special to both the ancient and the current Mexicans. They are said to represent the souls of the dead coming back to Earth on their annual visit on the Day of the Dead. So I gave Miku a little butterfly necklace. When researching about certain countries, I always find so many cool and interesting animals, but when I look up what species are endemic to Germany, I find this. Giant rainworm of Baden. Wow, doesn't that want to make you visit Germany? Okay, but jokes aside now, it was time to work on the background. I wanted this part over with as fast as possible because I always dread drawing backgrounds. I tend to start really motivated, but then I slowly start to lose interest and eventually just say, good enough. So I knew I had to work quick as well. Once again, I used the assistance tool to draw the lines that were going to eventually become the houses. For inspiration, I looked at random streets in Tabasco, Mexico. While drawing, I noticed that everything needed so much more detail and I was going to have to sit here for a really long time if I was going to make this look right. So I decided to do basic shapes instead and add a blur filter to the part with the houses. Now, I know, I said I wasn't going to do this as much anymore to challenge myself. This was just too much work. At this point I realized that I should probably put the base colors on Miku first, so that I at least know what parts of the background won't be visible. I didn't want to waste time on parts that weren't going to be seen anyway, so I did that first. Most of the colors were pretty straightforward since I knew that I was going to make the ribbons red, white and green, and I had a reference for the dress. The table was going to be wooden, of course, but the plates needed a splash of color to match everything. Then I also colored the food, which took longer than expected, so I speed that up a bit. After finishing the base colors for the figure, it was right back to the background. I drew the sky like I usually do with the fluffy clouds plus shadows. Now I'm starting to think that maybe I should have put a shadow on the floor caused by the clouds, but oh well, it's too late now. So far the houses in the backgrounds are just basic shapes, but later I add more detail. While scrolling through the streets of Mexico, I noticed that a lot of shops and houses have bars on the window for security. So I put those in the drawing too. Of course, shops also need signs. And as a little Miku reference, one of them says 39. After blurring the image and being done with most of the background, I realized something important. How could I forget the most important Mexican icon of them all? Goku! I felt silly that it hadn't occurred to me until now that Goku needed to be in the picture. So I put a little figure of him in the background. Now I'm sure that this is authentic Mexican. Anyway, now I drew the texture for the wooden beams and table. The wall gave me a hard time because I wanted it to have a texture, but everything I tried just looked bad. Eventually, I just stuck with this because I knew that I wasn't going to get better. Next was the big shadow cast by Miku on the table, and I remembered that I wanted to put some papel picado in the background to add more colors. I worked out a basic shape first and then copied it a bunch of times. For the pictures I saw online, each of them had a different pattern cut out, but I wasn't going to spend this much time on that. After all, the background was already complicated enough for me. After all, I remembered an art tip I once heard about spending too much time on details most people won't even notice. We don't really look at other people's art with the same attention to detail as we do with our own, unless we want to copy it. But on our timeline, we usually only look at a picture for a few seconds max and then scroll on. So I figured that this was good enough, and most people won't look that close anyway, so just don't look too hard, okay? Same can be said about the details on the food. I don't know how anime does it, but they always manage to make the food look so delicious. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. We've all seen those images online of perfectly shaded Ghibli dishes. In fact, I looked at those to figure out how I was going to go about this, but it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I was a bit disappointed with the outcome, but there's always a next time, I guess. And that's it for the background. Now for the more fun part. Finally, I was able to start with Miku herself, and I did so by shading her eyes first. You have no idea how happy I was to be done with this background. I also defined her lips a bit more, which I saw someone do online, and I think I will keep this up. It looks cute in my opinion. Finding the right shade for the shadows on the skin is still an issue for me, as you can see. I looked at a few tutorials which all told me the same way of going about choosing the colors, but it didn't look right to me, so I was forced to just eyeball it. Does anyone know how I can correctly pick the right shade for shading the skin, cause I feel like this is still not it. After that came the hair, which I also tried to change up a bit. Can you tell? Probably not, but I tried to make it look more like cell shading instead of what I usually do. I think it's very apparent that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to art, but this is kinda what this channel is all about. I'm just trying to find my own art style and my way of doing things. So please don't be shy to leave some criticism in the comments. It's how I get better. I kept the highlights smaller this time because I liked how it looked on the other drawings when I was experimenting around. I do this sometimes to practice and find out where I want to go with my art journey. I post them mainly on my socials, but some are exclusive to my Patreon in the description. If you are interested in that, make sure to check that out. I mainly post early access and exclusive stuff on there, but I was thinking about adding other rewards so people can get more bang for their buck. Maybe I can put the names of the people in my videos at the end or something entirely different. As you can tell, my Patreon is new and I haven't used the site yet, so I have a lot to learn on this front as well, but I'll figure it out. The shading on the clothes was not that hard after I put some harsher highlights on the hair like this. I started doing this a few drawings ago, and this has become part of my usual drawing routine or art style, if you can even call it that. Lastly, I wanted the picture to be lit by the sun, and I added yellowish highlights on the body. Now I was done, and here's the finished drawing. I must say that I'm pretty happy with how this ended up looking. Even my friend said that this is probably the best drawing I've done so far, and that makes me really happy. Hopefully my progress won't stop here, and there will be many videos to come. Thank you so much for watching, and take care!